welcome. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Dorita's already explained about all the questions and everything, so I will just move straight on. So most of these have been questions. So we're going to do the recording on the website afterwards, and that'll be available for a few months. We will put then the questions and answers on there as well. So please do use the question box. We will take a comfort break. So as we said, we will have a 5-10 minute breaks depending on how long I talk on for in this section, and we will address the questions in the second half of this. So I think that's just going to be easier. I'll get on with the slides. We'll do that in the first half, and then we'll do the questions and answers in the second half. So do feel free to put them in throughout. I can't see them at the minute, so it won't distract me. So do that as they occur to you, and we'll come back to them all later. We will definitely share the slides online as well, so all of that will be available to you. So, Aggregate Offshore record. So here's a timeline on what we were going to do with the whole major review of AOR. So establishing what we actually wanted to do, the priorities and the actual requirements of AOR data, and publish the consultation material. So as you'll be aware, that is the stage we are at now. So they've been out for about a month. We've got another couple of months going. We thought we would run this session today and another one on Friday, just to talk through what these are, to make sure to make sure people understand what's in the consultations, and if you've got any questions, we can address those now and give you a couple of months to kind of go away and finish thinking about it before you send in your consultation responses. As always, we will then finish up that consultation. We will do the usual analysis of responses and publishing a summary of those responses. And that means the notification of changes are kind of due end of this year, but probably the very beginning of next year, in terms of what will definitely change. And that is for 25, 26. I've just noticed the date is wrong on there. That's a good start. That's not 24, 25, that'll be 25, 26. So what does this cover? So for today, we are just talking about the England and Wales part of that. So that is the major review of AOR, but it is also an update to the student record as well. The session on Friday, which is a second consultation, is for Northern Ireland and Scotland. Now, there might be a couple of you from Northern Ireland and Scotland here today, because we have said you can respond to this individualised one. That is up to you, but only the aggregate one for Northern Ireland and Scotland is needed. So that means today's session, I'm only going to talk about the England and Wales stuff. We will just focus on that and ignore the Northern Ireland and Scotland. That will be for Friday. So what are we actually trying to do? So collected from 25, 26, there we go. That date is correct. I've got it correct in one of the slides. So we're questioning what we're going to do with that. And so for England and Wales, that is about making it individualised. That's not really a question, that is what is going to happen. It's how we collect that individualised data that is open for debate in the consultation. So there's a question of whether it's once or twice a year. There is not a strong requirement either way. It could fit with a student record twice a year when we get there, or it could be once a year. That is still an open question. And the other big thing that we wanted to address in this, which people have told us time and time again, is that the type field in AOR does not work, and so needs a big overhaul. So the expansion that we have to the student record is only for England and Wales, as I say, and we will cover that in the proposal. So there's an extra bit. It's not just AOR in this consultation for England and Wales. So we have the usual regulatory justifications. So us being the designated data body for England, in Wales, we will have the Commission for Tertiary Education, CETA, is that how we're going to say that acronym? By the time we get around to instigating these data. And also the GMC as well is involved in this. Now, I have a feeling looking through the attendees, the two that are relevant to this are not actually here today, but I will talk about them so that if you're watching the recording, you will hear about this. So why are we doing a review? We have wanted at HESA to do it for quite a while anyway. Now, JISC, sorry, I'm going to make that mistake today. So we knew that this was coming. We tried to do it and then lockdown happened. So obviously it got put on the back burner for a bit. We've come back around to doing it. So different OFS and HEFQ have said different things about it. England have responded in their quality and standards response about needing to do this and get all the right level of data, and particularly understanding who's registered with a provider, where they're taught, and where they're studying for an award of a registered provider. and that means whether it's UK or overseas for England, they are all encompassing the OFS's remit. Sorry, these first few slides are very wordy. I know that's not very good on a presentation. I've basically copied them from the consultation. There are lots more details in there. We've tried to include an awful lot of information about what it's going to be used for, so that hopefully it gives you a very good basis to make your decisions on how you want to respond to that. So the last bit on here then is that the partnership students, so that's the expansion to the student record. OFS are very keen to get that data. They consider it necessary in order to fill all their duties. And other organisations, so DFE as well have indicated a need to improve the data on TNE, so they've got a much better understanding of the value that that's providing to the UK economy. And GMC, as I've mentioned, they've got a regulatory interest in having some more data than we currently have on TNE students for those who are regulated by the GMC, which, as I said, I think is only 2 providers for England. And over in Wales, so yes, Hannah is here today. Thank you, Hannah. So if there's any questions about the regulation, she can address those. But yes, their remit is expanding as well in terms of understanding activities overseas as well as in the UK. And as I mentioned, it'll be a CETA that will be in place when we get around to that. So yes, again, lots of text, sorry, about exactly what we're going to do. Consider it necessary to have individualized data for this for overseas student and not just the aggregate data we have now in order to do all the things that they want to be able to do. So stepping into the proposals themselves. So as I say, these are the English and Wales side, which will include the GMC for those 2 English providers. So we have proposal 1. So starting with the coverage expansion. So this is what we're kind of calling partnership students as a way of referring to these. It's now going to include all the students who are studying in the UK who are taught by the reporting provider or are studying for an award by that reporting provider. With the caveat that if that provision is already returned somewhere else, so in the ILR for the Education Skills Funding Agency, then you don't need to return it twice. We don't want double counting. So if it's already returned, that's okay. But if it's not returned and it comes under any of those criteria, then it should now be included in the coverage. That is the proposal. And this is about making sure that the right things can be monitored and that all of that information is being collected for England and Wales in order to do that. And because this is an expansion to the student record, there's just a line in here to be clear that that is therefore a full student record. With the AOR, we're talking about a slightly reduced set, but this expansion for partnership students is the full student record. So that's the first proposal on there. We did, while we were drafting the consultation, wonder about putting this in a separate consultation, because I appreciate this might be a different set of colleagues talking about the student record as opposed to the AOR record, but actually on the face of it, more data was needed for these students as well, and it was just getting a lot of crossover. So we just put it all into one big consultation with lots of explanation about which bits of data are required and why they're required. So onto the second proposal. So this is about expanding the student coverage so that we now include these TNE students, so the transnational education, higher education students. So those, basically everyone who's in AOR will become into the student record, and all of that will be collected, and we won't collect the AOR for England and Wales. So it'll be a reduced set of data. We know we don't need all of those data items, and that's what I will go through today and what is in the consultation. But the existing requirements for everyone who will still be in the student record, that's not going to change. So the example here is distance learning students. We know some of those are outside the UK, but we actually need the full record for those because of funding and being able to understand all of that. So that's the second proposal there. There's the 2 coverage expansions. I will take a moment to talk about type. So as I said, that was one of the big things we wanted to address. We looked at lots of different classifications, but the one we kind of stopped on was the British Council's one, and we discussed with them how they come up with that and what was happening with that. And we found that actually that was going to be the most appropriate one for us to use. It was the closest to the definitions that we kind of needed for higher education. And so we've kind of used that as a starting point and adapted that to where we would want that to be. Whilst we were doing this work, we found it very helpful ourselves to step through all of our understanding about what do we mean when we're talking about T&E and overseas study. So we drew up a lot of scenarios ourselves to make sure that we'd actually covered everything. And we figured as we were doing that, actually it probably makes sense to share that with you, to show you how we've come up with that, and that gives us an opportunity to check that we've not missed anything. So we've drawn out all of that. We've got definitions for each of the different answers that we want for the type replacement. And so you can tell us whether or not that fits your provider. And we fully accept that the terms we're using are probably different terms that you're going to be using, but we hope that we've put enough explanation in there that you can work out which one matches your term. So I've put in here, I know I said I wasn't going to mention Northern Ireland and Scotland, but I have put it in here just to be very clear. So in the 2 consultations across the 4 countries, Northern Ireland and Scotland are going to definitely require these 2 in AOR. And for England and Wales, there's an optional question in there about whether you want to be collecting that. And I'll come back to that a bit later on. But for now, I've got there. These are the ones that we've come up with. So we've come up with 2 fields. It would be program types and venue types. And that's just the nature of the definitions and how it was there. That's how we can kind of cross match those, so that you'll return a different type of program, the actual thing you're delivering, and then the venue type in terms of where that's being delivered and how that fits in with your kind of campus and overseas arrangements. So between those 2 fields, we can get all of the information that we need. So I mentioned we drew up all the scenarios. I've just done a quick screenshot, but the link is down at the bottom there. Right at the very end, I've redone all these links, so I will actually go onto the website and show you where these are. But basically, these are all the scenarios that we've got. So we got through 9 scenarios. We mapped up the meaning of what we've got. There's some lovely videos on there to hopefully, as I say, present it in a way that means you can interpret it for your own provider. And I'd be really interested in feedback, maybe in that final question in the consultation, about whether this was helpful. This was something we did new for AOR. We've not tried this before. We just wanted to find a different way to present it, and so it'd be really helpful to know if that was useful, or not useful at all, actually. And then, depending on those responses, we might actually use those in future training events, or even for the guidance when we actually come to implement this. So that's the type, where we've got the type. Now to the actual data model changes. So these are changes and additions to what we need to do. So we're going to talk about the partnership, so the student expansion and the T&E students at the same time. So there are kind of 4 sections in this bit, and we will go through from the top. Oh, yep, sorry, I missed the slide. So yeah, what I did is we've done a model to show where all of the new fields are going to sit. We've done this quite a bit for the Data Futures program when we were showing the student records, so hopefully this is a little familiar. It's kind of a color-coded thing to show where the fields are, because I know some people are more visual learners, and so this is an easier way to kind of see where those fields are going. So the keys there around new fields and ones that are moving and ones that are changing, and then the red ones, the squares there, are for the GMC ones only. And there is a full copy, there's a PDF copy of this, so you can download it separately as well if you want to, print it off or something. Well, that's what I do anyway, print it off and have it on my desk. So new items. So this is for all the students. This is going to be partnership students and for T&E students. So we have a registration entity. So this is the organisation and a free text name field for that organisation. This is a new entity, so that means you can put it repeated times depending on if you need to do that to show that maybe there's multiple registrations. There's an awarding body. We've already got the awarding body entity in there, but we're going to add a name field into this. And then course role. So again, there will be a name field in here, free text name field, and a country field. So with this one, what this is kind of showing is obviously the UK paren is what we're using for a lot of identities now. We obviously can't use that for overseas, it's UK. So for these, we've made a decision between wanting to return the name, accepting that there could be some variations in that that's not necessarily going to be a robust match, but we'd like to see if we can get some alignment across different providers, maybe using the same organisation, but we'll see how that goes. And then some of these have got country, so like the course role, and there's a couple of others. In terms of that's allowing us to get a rough picture of where it is in as much detail as we can kind of get away with, and you don't necessarily need to return any more than that. So then there we go, there's the countries. So for the next one, so there's another one on venue in terms of being able to roughly identify the venue overseas, and study location. So that's the matching up to where the students are actually studying. So I think, yes, I've stepped them through in all the tables. So here's a little bit more detail. The organisation, so we will be UKPRN for the UKPRN ones, and then we've got the generic values for the others, and then the name. So that will only be required where you're returning to say it is an overseas organisation. So you don't have to do the name field when it's, you're returning a UKPRN. And then awarding body, similarly there, so the ID field is already there, and the new thing is the body, free text name field for that. Oh, and sorry, similarly, that if you only need to return the free text name fields when that is going to be an overseas awarding body in there. Course delivery, so here's another name field being added into there. Again, free text fields only need to be filled in when they're overseas organisations being returned in the ID field, and we've got the country one in there to capture who is actually teaching, where the teaching is taking place. Then venue, again, just the country field right at the bottom there is going to be added because you won't be able to fill in like the UKPRN fields. Distance learning, there's the last country field, so that's just going to be an extra field on the study location entity. So this is because you don't need to return a venue for distance learning students, and so the country will be here rather than on venue. So data items are no longer required. So there's only one on here. Don't get too excited. The primarily outside of the UK field, so the PRI non-UK field, that's going to be removed. In the next proposal, we are having a new flag for basically TNE flag is the name for it to, essentially identify who's in AOR so that we can continue to do what we do now and knock them out of populations where we need to. And so PRI non-UK has been replacing the old LOCStudyS, which I'm sure everyone loves. I myself have to double check the guidance whenever I'm talking about this. It's a confusing field, and so we want to try and simplify that and make it a lot clearer. And so we're going to have a new flag. So that means that the old PRI non-UK field is not going to be needed anymore. So here is the flag. It will be just a field with one value in it, transnational education engagement. As I said, to identify those students. So existing data items. So now that's all the stuff for partnership students. Now we're just, everything that's coming here on the data items is just for TNE students. So student identifiers. We've got those, so that'll be the SID. We need SID every there all the time to identify them, and because this is now individualized data, the students will need a SID, whereas they wouldn't necessarily have needed one before for returning an AOR. You may have allocated one anyway, but we didn't need to collect it. And so we've also got ownStu as well, because we know that is helpful for providers. Personal characteristics data. So this has been the most controversial thing I think that people have said to us when we started this is you can't collect all of the personal characteristics and equalities data. And you'd be right, there's a lot of that stuff that is not meaningful for students outside of the UK, or we shouldn't be collecting outside of the UK for any risk to the students themselves. So we have worked with such customers and they immediately agreed with that, and so the list is a lot smaller than it would be for the full student record. We only need the birth date and the perm address country for these students. There are some more required for GMC students, but I'll come back to that in a moment. So course and qualification data. So this is really important so that our regulators can understand roughly what's happening with those students, and we can split them by the different qualification types, the different subject areas, and the different kind of delivery models that exist. So it's important to be able to differentiate the TNE students on those same basis. So a lot of the course and qualification data is kind of there. I'm not sure if all of these would be needed by overseas students. Some of these are kind of flags and you only use them if they're applicable, or like the accreditation, you only use it if it's applicable. But we've given you the option to do that. Again, be really interested to know if that is what you'd be expecting to return. So course qualifications and subjects are the big ones there. engagement data. So again, this helps regulators understand what's happening with those engagements and taking into account the context in which those students are studying. So we have a lot less fields on engagement, just those critical ones, to be able to understand what the student's doing, their activity, and how they're progressing through the course. So a lot of these are start and end dates and the usual identifiers. And we've got accreditation, as I said, the option in case people will need to use some of those. So all of the accreditation fields are there. So the student one that's on engagement is here. And then similarly with student course session, that's the same thing in order to be able to understand the progression and see what the students are doing during their course. So a little bit more on these ones around some starts and end dates, reasons for them moving on and off, and the mode field and things like that to understand how they're progressing. And then that gets us to leaving data. So obviously it's important to understand what happened at the end and the outcomes for those students on each of the courses. So we've got the leaver entity to explain when students fully stop and why, and hopefully qualifications being awarded there. And again, accreditation if that is relevant. So I said GMC, so there are some more fields required for the GMC. They want to be able to use the overseas students in exactly the same way that they treat the UK students. And so in order to do that, that means they need more personal characteristics data than most of the overseas students will be requiring. So I've put in red there, the birthday and OSG, they are all collected for everyone. So it's just clearer which are the ones that are being added onto here, so the names and surnames. So that's for matching purposes. And then for these ones, these are the fields they actually need to create their report. So particularly if they have things around disability and ethnicity. And in the consultation, we've linked to examples of where they've done that. They want to be able to treat overseas students in the same way as they do the UK students. So that's why they're asking for it. We've tried to put lots of explanations in around that so that it's clear to the providers that need to answer these questions. Obviously keen to hear people's thoughts on that in the consultation. So further data items. So there are a couple of things that we discussed in the consultation where they weren't required by the regulators, but we could see the value in having them. So we're going to start with a type field. Here's us coming back to the type field. So these are the two fields we talked about, program type and the venue type. You'll notice on venue type that distance learning is not here because in the individualized record, we already be able to identify distance learning students. So we don't need that in here, but it will be there for the Northern Ireland and Scotland version. So these are the two fields we've collected, and this is where they would be collected. But the proposal is that the regulators want to derive that. They believe that all the information that will be in the record will be enough to derive these. And we've included the derivation in the consultation so that you can have a look and see if that would agree with how you would want to categorize these. And there's a box there so you can explain if you don't think it would work or if you do think that would match exactly to your provider. So that's why these are optional, because they believe the derivation will get exactly what they need. But we wanted to give providers the option to tell us if they would rather return it themselves, actually. And so there's a little table here, the different options we proposed in there, just to be really clear, because there are different levels if they're actually the derivation would be enough, or whether we just kind of optionally collect the venue or program type, or whether we make it mandatory everyone so that the data is there across the piece. So there are lots of options to step through for these ones for type. And the other bits for optional data. So what we kind of named activity data. So what they're doing in the different years, as I say, they're not absolutely required by the regulators to get through this, but we could definitely see the value in having that. And so we wanted to understand if providers could return it at all. Is this something you would collect for or could collect for overseas students? And actually, would you like to be able to return this so that we've got a little bit of a richer picture of what's happening each year? Or actually, would you rather not? If it's optional or they don't need it, you don't want to send it. So those three fields are there for student course sessions. So we've got the placement, the preparatory flag, and the study abroad field, and then the intercalation field as well. So other questions that are in the consultation. So those are all the data items that we will be discussing. Now there are other things that are proposed in the consultation. So the timing, how quickly we are collecting this, and what the options are for providers. So there are quite a few questions around this, just so that you can give your burden assessment on how this is going to work. We could match what AOR does now and collect just once a year, so that would be the kind of traditional HESA reporting year. Or we could collect it twice. By the time this comes in, so from 24-25 onwards, student will be collected twice. And if anyone's not picked up the exact reference periods, those are the dates there, till the 1st of December and the 2nd of December onwards. We could do the aggregate offshore students that will be in student now, so TNE students. We could collect that twice a year as well. So the reason we didn't make an actual decision on this is because regulators really wanted to understand the burden. Is it easier to do it the same student, or is it actually better to just do it once, depending on how systems are there and how easy that's going to be for providers to consume that into student record. So very keen to hear feedbacks on that, and very keen to hear explanations on why you'd prefer that. So some helpful links. So there is the actual review page itself. Hopefully you've all seen this, because if you've got to the events themselves, you've probably had to go through these anyway. So that's the main page, that there are information is all linked off that page. So we've got the project mandate, so exactly why we started this as a PDF explaining all of the reasons behind why we need to review this data, and exactly how we were going to do it, so the review group, the rough timescales, where we've got to. And the 2 consultation links. So for today, it will be the top one for England and Wales, but this Scotland and Northern Ireland one is there as well if you wanted to have a look at what we are doing for that one. Here is the supporting definitions and scenario page. In a second, I will come off share and I will show you where these are on the actual website. So this is the explanation of how we got to the definitions that we did. And then at the bottom of that is those 9 scenarios that I showed you before. Other things around the consultation and what's being included. So people always request a PDF of the actual consultation text, or ideally a Word version, but what we've done is we've had to take it from the consultation software, so it has to be a PDF, I'm afraid, and that does mean the layout isn't always the best. Sometimes the spaces kind of jump pages, but it is there, so if you want to be able to download it and go and talk about it before you respond, at least there's something there as a PDF. We've got that definitions and scenarios page to help you understand where we've got to. And as I say, there's little videos in those scenarios for you to watch as well. And there's the PDF of the actual model. So that kind of data futuresy looking model that we use, hopefully that can help you see where all of the fields are going to sit. So I think those are all the things everyone asked us for. So we really tried to make sure we'd got everything ready up front for you. So questions. Right, I'm going to just quickly, you have to bear with me 1 second while I unshare and reshare, and I can show you where everything is sitting on the page. So, okay. I think you can see the website. Yes, there we go. So here is the review page. So that is that main link that I got to. And the big consultation links right at the very top there, so you can't possibly miss them. So the rest of this page is all the background and all of the things around why we're setting off the review. And right at the bottom here, this is all the related links. So the consultation itself. So this is the links, a copy of the link. So this is where the quick links go straight to that from the email. It's just another way of navigating it. Here is the definitions and scenarios. So this is the page of explanation of how we've got to stuff. All of that's there. Then here's our definitions. So for individualized, which is today, here is how we've got to that. So we've got the different, the 4 different things on program type. I'm going to whiz past this because you'll be able to look in your own time. And then the venue type. There are the 3 for that, because remember, distance learning is not needed for this. Oh yeah, we did put it at the bottom. That's where distance learning will be for individualized. It's already there. So that's all the definitions. We scroll past the aggregate ones. Here are the scenarios. So just having a quick look at the first one. Here is a video and an explanation about what we actually kind of mean with some completely made up examples. So don't try and read into any of these. These are totally made up. What we tried to do with this was then show you how we thought this would be recorded, if that helps you identify and kind of relate to some of these scenarios. So we've used the new field names that we will be adding and how we would have expected them to be filled out. And that's the case for all of those 9 examples that we have there. And that's it. Okay, everyone, I think we are at 9 minutes too. I gave you an extra minute there while I was just finishing reading the questions. So it looks like a couple of people who left who've come back. So I think we will start with the questions, if that's all right. I'm going to read the questions out. I'm going to read them out anonymously, and it's only if you particularly want to say something or add anything to it, then feel free to put your hand up if you were the person raising the question. Otherwise, we'll keep them anonymous given this is recorded. So the first question was about sharing the slides. Very definitely we will share the slides. All of the text was copied and pasted from the consultation, so you will see the text, but obviously I appreciate that seeing the slides when you're looking at this is going to be easier. So next question, will there be an opportunity to trial the enhanced submission of AOR data prior to the full launch in 2025 in the same way as we had for the data futures return? That is a very good question. I don't actually think we talked about this. Yes, if providers would find this helpful to do a trial, we could have a look to see whether that is there. I mean, we know the student record is there, so if it does go down that route, then we could allow you to do that as a trial and see. So yes, I will take that one away as a suggestion. I admit, not one that we had thought about. Right, so next one. Good to have the regulator for HE in Wales here today. Were the OFS invited, as I'm sure there might have been a few questions surrounding data burden? Yes, all statutory customers were invited. I did make it clear to them that we were going to just present what was in there, and any questions we can take back to them later. So if there are any questions around that will be directed to OFS, I'm sure I can send them on and they will answer, so that when we publish this, that the answers will be there. It was just about timing because we really tried to get these in quite quickly, and so not everyone will be available on the days that we picked. But thank you for Hannah to coming along today. Right, sorry, give me a second. The scrolling up and down button is annoying me. So next question, will students returned in the ILR to the ESFA no longer be returned in the data futures student record? So sorry, I'm just pausing, trying to interpret that question there. So if students are being returned in the ILR now, and not in student record, then I think that carries on. The only reason we mention the ILR is where that expansion is coming. So if those students that would be in that expansion, so the partnership students, we're kind of nicknaming it, if they're already in a ILR, then no, you don't need to add them to student because they're already being returned, and so OFS and HEFQ will get that data. So sorry, ILR will be for England, OFS will get that data, so those students will already be included. It's only when they're not already there that they will need to then be added. So hopefully that answers the question. I think that's what you're asking. So next one. With a full student return record, being required for partnership students, would this be all fields of a student record a reduced return, and is it required for income exchange and dormant students when we've got that reduced return? So the partnership students, it will be a full record, so it will be the same as all the students that are currently a student, and then those 4 new proposals that we've added into proposal. Well, it's in proposal 3, but it's in the first section there. So that's like registration, the course delivery, and the awarding body one. Those data items will be also required. So next bit. So we don't fully understand the definition for proposal 1. So this is the expansion for partnership students. Please can we have some scenarios describing this? The scenarios currently provided are for all of TNE students, and we've quoted the examples we've got there. They've got some of these examples, for example, pre-sessional language courses, but they're not partnerships. Now, in terms of scenarios, I admit when we were looking at this and putting examples in, all we ended up doing with the scenarios is we had to make them generic enough, which meant we were basically describing the definitions of those fields, and we didn't felt that was helpful. So Hannah, although this question has actually come from an England provider, I think the question is the same across England and Wales. I don't know, Hannah, if you're able to jump in and give any more explanations about what that could be, that the students that fall under proposal 1, in case that's helpful.
I think, speaking from a sort of Wales point of view, because I'm not sure exactly what happens in England necessarily, but an example could be where an FE college might have a specifically designated course, and at the moment that's not returned anywhere. So they're not sort of regulated by us. And they may not be returning that provision on the FLIR record, which is the equivalent of the ILR in Wales. We are moving towards having providers in Wales with specifically designated courses moving on to HESA. So that'll be an example at the moment, but that example may sort of not exist by the time we move to the new way of collecting data. But there could, for example, be a specifically designated course for Wales in an English provider that they don't return on the ILR at the moment for whatever reason. So that could be something they might return. I'm not expecting a great deal of provision coming under that proposal 1 in Wales, at least. I'm not so sure about England because it's slightly different in Wales in that the FE colleges do return their HU data to HESA, so it should cover a lot of what might not be covered in England. But as I say, for Wales, we're not expecting a lot of providers to suddenly have to return a lot of provision that they're only the awarding body for and have no sort of franchise or partnership relationship with the provider necessarily. So that's the sort of example in Wales. And so the question was about free sessional language courses, which are not part of partnerships. I'd have thought whatever you're doing for those now would continue in this with the new sort of way forward with this data, because if that's not in the coverage of the student record at the moment and is not in the coverage, it is not a T&E provision and is not a sort of award only kind of provision, I'd thought that it would be still be out of the coverage. Rachel, if that's your understanding as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Hannah. We can throw that question across to OFS as well, just to make sure there aren't anything extra for England side of things. Okay, next question then. So will you do a SID for students who started prior to 2023 or a HUSID? Yes, there have questions with the ITT record a lot with this one, aren't there? So I think because it's joining the student model, then the SID field will be there. I guess the preference is definitely for new students. They have to be SID. I guess there's a question about how many students that are still studying and have a HUSID already. That would be helpful to know, actually. I guess following our same guidance as currently, if they already have a HUSID, you could carry on returning it, but we won't have seen that HUSID, and there's a possibility the validation rules might block it now, so we might have to do something to amend that. So I think throwing that question back to you, it would be helpful to know how many students you think that would be, particularly on the HUSID, where you might want to return them with a HUSID that we won't have seen before. We can allow for both, we just need to work out what that's going to be. Okay, next one. With the expansion of the record that we would need to return data for students who are not studying for provider credit or award bearing, I'm guessing, again, that's referring to the proposal 1. Hannah, you didn't actually mention anything about provider credit or award bearing. My understanding is that it's the same as now, but I don't know if there's anything to add on that.
Yeah, I think that would be the same as now. So if they're not in the coverage because they're not studying for credit or a qualification, then they wouldn't sort of then become in coverage under these new arrangements. So yeah, I don't think it would that's a change for those kind of students anyway.
Thank you, Hannah. Okay, next question then. For students that move between the UK and overseas over their course, will that rule that once you're in the student return, you need to stay in the student return apply? I.e., no reduced return for TNA students after they've been in the standard population for a previous return. Now, yes, we did actually have a question in the consultation around this, and then I realised the explanation for where we were getting to got such an absolute mess, we took it out, and this is something that is on my list to look at after. It might be helpful actually to bring in a few providers who have examples of this. So up until now, discussing with statutory customers, we've said we should just keep it as it is now. Keep any guidance that is now the same where we can. So that would mean that, yes, if they were on the full return, once they started doing the full return, you stay on that full return. We wanted to explore to see if we could bring that down so that when they go overseas and they're not going to come back to the UK, whether we could bring that back down to the reduced return set. The problem we were having is making that absolutely robust and making sure that it was very clear that's what you were doing. So for me, that's still on the table. It's something that, as I say, would be helpful to work through with a group of providers that have this a lot or have a lot of AOR provision, to see if we can do that robustly so we can let you do a reduced return once they've gone. But that one's still under discussion, I think would be fair. Okay, next question. So would there be an option to return all the same data fields as our normal students return in the HESA return? It might be easier for us to treat them the same as the others rather than separate them. So that's, I assume, returning the AOR students we're talking about here that are joining, and we're saying it's a reduced return set. So we've had some interesting discussions in the last few months actually about similar fields in the student record currently. I think the way we're doing this is we probably don't want more data than we actually need. So particularly that personal characteristics set of data, we absolutely do not want you returning that for overseas students. So I think what we could do on the basis of this is be absolutely clear where those fields exist. So like now in the student record coverage, we have the must not be returned outside of the coverage statements. Make sure that is applicable to AOR students. And for the other fields that are a lot less sensitive, we could double check whether that is going to be a problem or not. So I think I'll take that one away if that's okay. I suspect, if I'm honest, that it will go down into, yes, you need to do the reduced return set because we can't have data we can't do something with, but we will take that away and explore it and see exactly which fields would actually fall under that category. As I say, personal characteristics and equalities data, very definitely don't be returning that. So yeah, we can explore that one when we get to closer to the proposals themselves. So next question, will you not be collecting modules and module instance for TNA students? Nope, we will not be collecting that. Nobody needed to do anything, even in Wales where you do a lot of the funding on the modules, nobody needed that for AOR students, sorry, for TNE students. Got to call them TNE students now because AOR, they won't be an AOR for England or Wales. So yeah, no, nobody need that data, so it's not in the model, and we don't want you returning optionally either if that's the case. I guess the same principle as I've just said, we don't want more data than we actually need. So no, that won't be an optional thing like that for TNE students. The next one, oh, love the supporting definitions. Oh, great, thank you, really helpful. One that I've come across is where a partner uses, oh, this is a really long question, sorry, I'm going to read this slowly. So one that I've come across is when a partner uses a hub approach to deliver to students in multiple countries. For example, students might study by distance learning through a partnership organisation, but fly into somewhere like Trinidad for other Caribbean islands for their face-to-face sessions run by the university or the partner. The partner may or may not be a Trinidadian organisation. These students are very often geographically mobile, so might study by distance learning in multiple countries. I'm struggling to see how the students would be returned in these cases. So I think there is an example where we have one of these where you've got like a hub location and the students may or may not go there. So there is a physical location, but you're kind of treating these as distance learning, if I've understood this correct. I am fairly sure, although Hannah can correct me if I've forgotten this, but actually we don't need to know the location of that hub. So I think these type of students we're treating the same as distance learning. There is definitely one of those scenarios covers something like this. So that's, I think, how I would see that. I don't know if that's enough information. That's quite long, so I think maybe if the person who put this in maybe drop Liz on an email and we could just step through the scenario properly to make sure I've understood it correctly. But that's how we kind of done that. We wanted to try and make it clear where we need the country location and where we don't, and particularly like these type of things where they roam around or distance learning where it doesn't actually matter where they are. We're trying to be clear where we need information and where we don't. But if that's not fully clear, then obviously we can add more stuff in. And actually, when people raise questions like this, it will be helpful when we come around to writing the guidance later, because then we can make sure that we have those actually written into the guidance. Okay. Right, next bit then. So just to clarify, if the TNA data is collected once a year, would that be a separate AOR return or would it form part of the student return, just on a different timeline? Not a silly question at all. So that's kind of one of the questions we're asking, and why there is a bit of an option around the number of times a year we collect this. I think the ideal would be that it's all in one student record for us, and then we can say all the students are together. That might mean that we have different coverage, so like some of the AOR stuff only needs to be returned at one of those reference periods. In a way, that's kind of up for discussion. But if we did that once a year, and actually taking them out for the other return for providers is more difficult. That's why we're saying actually maybe returning it twice is easier, and then you can just return it all the same time. So I think that is kind of down to what the responses will be and how people are going to find that as to how we kind of treat that. I'm not sure if that's a helpful answer, but it at least explains where we've got to for now. Right, okay. My questions keep jumping as more stuff comes in. Right, next one. So, are there scenarios for what data needs to be collected for UK partnerships where your organisation is the awarding body of a validator partner who has not submitted data to HESA in their own right? So, no, the scenarios that we've got are for. Wait, sorry, hang on. UK partnerships. Do you mean this in terms of a partnership for AOR data or the partnership data in the first proposal? Actually, the answer is different, I suppose. There. Oh, the person has put a hand up. So, sorry, training. Can you unmute the person who's just put the hand up? Are they able to speak so they can just explain?
Give me a sec. I'm on the mission.
Thank you.
I'm trying to find Alison.
We've got a lot of names to scroll through.
Hi, thank you.
Alison, you should be able to speak.
Thank you. Just to clarify, I'm thinking of a partner where they own the programme, we validate it, they're in the UK, they're registered with the Office for Students in their own right. We don't register the students, all we do is simply award the degree. And I don't think that partner actually returns any data to HESA in their own right because their conditions of registration, they don't need fee caps or anything. So I don't think
Yes.
they are subject to the same HESA data returns that we are. So what I wanted to know was who would then have to take responsibility for returning that data? Is it us as the awarding body? And if it is us as the awarding body, what are we needing to collect from our partner in order to return, or do we ask the partner to return it anyway?
So yeah, as you are the provider who will be, so yeah, you're in England, registered with the OFS, it will be your responsibility to return this. And I think this is exactly the type of examples where you wouldn't have been returning them before because things fall out of the different rules and coverages and we didn't need them. But now this proposal is saying that you do need it because you're doing that validation bit, even though most of that engagement you're not interacting with the students. So yes, and I think it is your responsibility in terms of what data is being collected. I think that's kind of, for us, that's the same as the rest of the student record. So all of the data items that you'd be returning for all of your actual students you're registering and teaching, it's the same level of data. So I guess from that point of view, then how you do that, I suppose, is, I guess I wouldn't want to tell you how.
That's our biggest challenge because obviously we're not
Yeah.
registering the students. The only data we kind of collect is their name, date of birth, an email address, so that we know where to send the certificate. And even then, we send the certificates to the partner to distribute. So we're not really collecting the full amount of data. So that was why I was asking the question, so we know what we need to think about.
Yeah, so I think definitely put that in your consultation response about whether that's going to be too difficult and whether that's, you know, what your difficulties are going to be around that, so that we can pass that on to OFS so they can hear that.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for shouting up to explain that so that I answered the right bit. Okay, next question. So if we are going to be returning the in-year data for 24-25 and having to plan for the AOR being in data features for 25-26, will HESA still be required in 24-25, as there will be considerable burden in getting this ready and then also resolving HESA as a resource limited at regular institutions? Sorry, can't speak. So yes, HESIS. The ultimate goal was to not collect HESIS once the data future student had settled down. So I admit we haven't actually pushed OFS on an actual date about when we're stopping with that. So this will give me an opportunity to send that question across. I will be honest, I don't actually know what the plans are in terms of exactly when they will stop that, but I totally agree with your point about extra burden, and maybe that is the right year to stop doing that. So I'm afraid I'll have to pass that one on to them, and we'll come back in the Q&As that we type on the website for the answer. So I'm starting to leave my questions. There's lots of questions, so thank you very much everyone who's putting all your questions in. Hopefully these are helping. Okay, next question. So would there be any consideration given to starting with 1 year return when the changes are rolled out, and review this later as to whether 2 returns a year would work? We may benefit from seeing how the move to 2 reference periods for data future student works fully before moving into AOR as well. I mean, yes, that is a potential way of stepping that. We have done that with other things, haven't we? We're stepping in the first bit and then making it, well, actually, I guess like the in-year return itself for data futures, the first 2 started off as annual, and then we went to the in-year a bit later on. So I think every option is on the table, and any examples that are put into the consultation responses, we will definitely consider and answer. So yes, I think would be my question to that. We can consider that. We'll see if anyone else would find that useful as well. Okay, next one. The academic years of our partners do not routinely follow the UK model. We have programmes starting every month of the year, which means that most cross the artificial HESA academic year. This also means that for a lot of our partners, they can start and delay, and in effect move to a later cohort. We're concerned that there will be overly burdensome reconciliation required at submission time to explain the seemingly mass movement of students. So if we're talking here a lot about the AOR students, I think that's one of the reasons we wanted to put it into the data futures kind of student model, because we've kind of stopped that HESA reporting year, and the student course session can start from whenever it makes sense to you. So I'm hoping that helps a little bit in terms of when they start. I appreciate that if students are moving back and forth quite a bit between cohorts, then yes, there might be some movements between that. If they're just moving between courses and different things, then you don't need to change the dates, but I'm presuming from the way you've explained onto this that potentially they are moving between different dates. So yes, I think that could be the case. I'm not sure there's a lot we can do about that. Hannah, this is a question from a Welsh provider. I don't know if there's anything you want to add on that. Students moving around between different dates.
I think, I mean, in looking at data on these T&E students, we're not expecting it to look, exactly like the students in the UK, and appreciate there will be differences in how things are structured and that kind of thing. So, we can take that into account when we look at the data. But hopefully, the sort of data future student record is better at coping with differences in academic years. So, I mean, it sounds like the concern is mainly about the burden for the provider in trying to reconcile this. But I don't know if the person asking the question wants to sort of maybe put some examples in the consultation response, so we can sort of see what the difficulties are exactly. But yeah, hopefully the new sort of data futures structure will sort of help with this kind of thing.
Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, definitely put some examples in the consultation, or if you want to talk about it now, you could drop Liaison an email, and we can, with Hannah, we can look through and hopefully help with where that is. Okay. Oh, sorry, lots of the questions. There we go. So as information on a student's change in status is held by our overseas partner, there is often a delay in when we are notified of a change. Will there be a tolerance for this if we have to submit a session status change with a backdated date? So I think this is actually the same for the student record with that stuff. If you don't know that information at the point that you are returning, then you can't possibly be expected to return it. So this is something we would like to, we'd like to see how this works for the data features model for, as I say, for all the students, not just TNE students, and see whether that's a problem. Because yes, we could build tolerances in. I will be honest, right now, I think the tolerance is probably set at 0 for stuff like this. Because ideally, in an ideal world, we'd like it not to, but we know that's not ideal. So yes, I think do this. Tell us how much of a problem this is. If you can see now, then feel free to put it in the consultation response. If not, this is something we will be looking at as the returns start coming in. So as I say, for student, we'll start looking at this, and then when AOR joins, those ones will come under the same consideration. So I think just always request a tolerance when you're triggering a rule like this, when you think genuinely this is something that's going to happen more often, and we can put it on our list of things to review and see whether we can do anything to help. Next one. So if the general consensus is for TNE students to be collected once a year instead of twice a year, would the reporting period cover the entire year? So the 1st of August to the 1st of July, or would it be just for one of the reporting periods? So it would be the full year. So it would be from 1st of August to the 31st of July. It wouldn't be if you're, say, only returning it in reference period 2. I guess that's probably the more likely one. At the end of that, it's only something that happened from the 2nd of December to the 31st of July, because then we'd have a missing few months. So no, if it is once a year, it will be for that entire 1st of August, 31st of July period. And that might play into your decision about how you want to return it, because maybe that means you're dealing with different reference period points for the same students in the same files. Sorry, for different students in the same file. Maybe that isn't helpful. So yeah, please put that in your response, consultation response, if that's the case. Right, next one. To add on to that, oh, sorry, I don't know which bit you added on to that. A non-mandatory trial, please. Simply just opening up that HTTP for this would be perfect. Oh, so add on to the question. Sorry, yes. Yes, I will definitely take that back. As I say, not something we've thought about before, whether that would be useful, but if it is, and it sounds like the data features way of doing that was very helpful, then we can definitely consider that. And as you say, if nothing else, opening it up so that you can try your students in the system, I'm sure that at least will be more possible. Right. So what is the point of asking for study abroad for TNE students if they aren't studying abroad, they aren't TNE? Yes, so that was one of the reasons it wasn't on the mandatory list, because study abroad for TNE students would be the UK bit. So yeah, maybe that doesn't work, because study abroad is then the wrong term to use for that. Yeah, I fully agree with the person who put that one in. Maybe that's not actually helpful, and so maybe that one won't be on the actual list at the end of it. Study abroad from your home location. That's not really a very good name. So yeah, sorry, that's not a very good answer, but I agree with you. Maybe that doesn't work as easy as it would for UK students. So is there expectation that there is one consultation response per institution? Yes, ideally that is the expectation. That's what we tend to ask for in consultations. What we've done actually we copied the OFS's approach to this. There's a question right at the top where you can indicate if this is kind of your provider response. But if, say, you really want to put something in extra to that maybe it's not your provider's response, but you still want us to hear, there is then an individual response option in that. So you can do more than one if you want to, but we would really like to understand which of those responses is kind of your official provider response. Where we get more than one response from a provider, I will probably email those people to ask them which one is the response. So I guess for the sake of me not having to send lots and lots of emails to you, ideally let us know which is the official one, and then, as I say, you can always put in some extra comments in there if you want to. Right. Next question. You say that this won't add to the burden for students who are already in coverage. How will we identify partnership students who will need registration details, given that there is no proposal to give them their own flag? So that is a very good question. and I'm just hesitating while I'm just thinking through what we were talking about when we were doing this. So I have a feeling that the partnership students will start being just treated like the rest of the student record. Yeah, do you know what? You stumped me on that one. I'm going to have to come back to that one and not answer that one unless, Hannah, you can remember what we discussed on this. That is a very good point.
Sure, I'm sure we considered it, but I just can't think how we would identify them separately from, you know, the other kind of students. I'm sure there was a
We definitely talked about it.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
can't remember what the what it was, but I think we must have checked that there was a way of identifying them as these kind of students, but I don't know what it is. So
We'll
yeah,
have to come back to you on that one, I'm afraid. You've actually completely stumped me. I didn't think that would happen today. We spent months talking about this. So, so yeah, apologies. I will come back to that. Right, so next question. If a partnership student is not currently reported to HESA because they are not studying at the required HE level, does this change? So no, if the level of study in terms of who we want in the record, that doesn't change. So if they are below that, then they're not required. It's only the ones that would fall into the normal coverage, but then adding on the kind of, if you're doing validating or awarding or teaching those students at any point and you're not already returning them. So no, the level of study and who is kind of within that population, so higher education, no, that would not change. Right. At the moment, we don't have to return the course role proportion, which relates to the delivery which we undertake, only that undertaken by another provider. Once the country flag is added to the course role entity, will that mean that by default, we have to return our proportion as well, given that our provision could be undertaken in this country or abroad? If so, will that only be the case for T&E students, or will it also apply to those students already in coverage? That's a very good point. I don't think we've actually considered that level of detail yet, so I will take that away. I don't think, with all of this stuff, we don't want to add any more reporting requirements to the existing students in the record where we can. So I think if we can avoid doing that, we won't ask you to do that. So for example, that TNE flag that will identify it, that could allow us to say, if this is related to the student, then you do need to return the country, and if it's not, then you don't. So this is exactly the type of thing and scenarios that I was really hoping we will get from this type of session and from the consultation, so we can make sure that we've worked through all of those. So yeah, at the minute, we don't want you to do any more reporting for the main student record. We will just have to work through that example to make sure that that is the case. So thank you. So next question. Sorry, just skipping past a couple that are not questions. Okay, what happens in the hub is in UK for a short period of time, for example, 4 days. What happens if the hub is in so the hub location that distance learning type students might be in the UK for a very short period of time, 4 days. So we tend to have rules of things where you don't need to report them until they're up to a certain number of days. So for the main student record, the off-venue activity, you don't have to do if it's 20 days, less than 20 days. That's going to be the case with the same definition. So from the top of my head, I think, is it 2 weeks? If they're in the UK less than 2 weeks, then you don't need to return them. So that would be the case for this one. If it's only a few days, I don't think that is long enough to fall into the coverage, so you wouldn't need to return that bit of information. Actually, the person who put that question in, it would be really helpful if you could drop Liaison an email with that example, because that could be a really good one to put in our guidance document. So if you're willing to do that, please could you drop them a message?
Rachel, sorry, you missed one question. So there was one more question before the kind of technical ones, and it started with, will all the new country fields apply only to T&E students? If so, that means that we will be providing more information about those students that we do about the abroad study periods for current pre non-UK students. Is that deliberate?
So the first bit of that question, thank you, Drota, thank you. The country fields, yes, that they are only applicable to TNE students where you're using like those overseas organisation generic values for most of those fields. So yes, we only want country fields for those because we can't have any other identifiers like UKPRNs and things for them. So yes, that does, I suppose, mean that there will be more information for those students, because I guess the key bit is they want to know where their kind of the base location is, and you need a bit more information about that when they then go do the study abroad or flip around. We don't need as much detail for that. We just need to know that they're doing that. So yes, that is kind of deliberate. That's the way we've tried to do it. If that doesn't make sense to you, very happy to hear in the consultation examples where you think that's not a good idea. We didn't want to ask for any more detail, so we didn't want to kind of do the reverse of asking for more detail of the other bits the other way round, because that wasn't necessary and people weren't going to use that level of detail. So yeah, so I hope that answers the question. We've asked for the level of detail we need for the main bit, and yes, I suppose there is that funny scenario. I think one thing that has occurred to me is when TNE students join the record, quite a lot of the guidance that is currently in the student record might suddenly start to sound a bit weird, because if we're talking about, the main location or overseas, actually overseas is kind of the main location for TNE students. So I think we might have to do a bit of tweaking of wording or adding, 2 bits of guidance. So for TNE students, this applies, and for the students that are currently in the record, this applies. I'm not sure how that will work. We haven't worked that through yet, but we need to make sure that it isn't confusing for exactly those kind of reasons and those examples. Right, where did I get to? Next question. Are software providers allowed to respond to this consultation? Our answer to whether we'd prefer 1 or 2 returns depending entirely on what the particular software house would do. Absolutely, anyone can respond to this consultation, and in fact we've been talking to lots of different sector groups, and I understand that quite a lot of those groups themselves are going to respond, so we will take a response from absolutely anyone. We highlight to the software providers, so we've got a Teams channel from the Data Futures programme with all the software suppliers and the in-house software providers on there as well. We highlight to them when we've got consultations and things to make sure that they are there, and if they want to respond, they can. So absolutely, very happy to hear from those software providers. In fact, maybe from this I will encourage them and say that actually providers would like you to respond if you can. Right, you've just mentioned that you're not interested in the country in which a distance learning student is studying and the question about the hub scenario, but you are asking for the country in the study location entity for those students in the distance learning flag is 02. What did I say? Have I said something stupid? So the country thing for distance learning, it's around whether they are physically located somewhere or whether they're attached to a provider in a particular country. And I think that's what I was trying to answer about the hub scenario. So maybe if I just said something wrong, I will go back and check in the recording that I haven't said the complete wrong thing. But that's what we're kind of asking for. So yeah, the country field and study location is enough for distance learning. We don't need to know if there was a hub or very specifically where that student was sat. So distance learning ones are ones that I want to double check that we've, particularly with the guidance, that we've been clear about where they are, because they're often exceptions in field, so like study location. Yes, I will take that one away, I think, and just double check that I have said the right thing. And what I'll do in when we publish these, I will write it out and make sure that it's very clear what the requirements actually are with that. Thank you. So next bit then. So the issue is most software providers still tie the data together using the concept of an academic year. Yes. I don't know if there's a lot I can say about that other than agree with you. They're still working through stuff. As I say, we've got that group with them to try and make sure that we link up with them and that they ask us questions. We go to some of the specific sessions with some of the software suppliers. So yeah, they're going to have to change some of this stuff if that's what it is. Hopefully they've all got those plans in place to do that. Do we have any idea of how the IFS will apply definitions of continuation and completion to TNE students? Will the definitions be the same, knowing that the data for TNE students is lagged? I will be honest, we haven't worked through the detail with them. We've asked them to do that consideration themselves. So I will put that question across to them. I think they've only identified for this what it is they want to get out of this, not very specifically how. So I will have to pass that question on to them, I'm afraid. I'm sure they would be keen to hear any suggestions where providers think they need to be different. I'm sure that will be helpful for them in the consultation response. Okay. If you are delivering a program at a physical location owned by a partner, but that partner has no involvement in teaching and assessing the program, which scenario do they fall under? So you're delivering the program at a physical location owned by someone else, but the partner has no involvement in the teaching and assessing. I will have to go double check the scenarios and come back in the written responses on this one. I can't remember which of the 9s those would fall under. But yeah, I'm sure that is one of those that does ring some bells. I will be honest, my colleague wrote up a lot of those scenarios, and he has a much more better understanding of which ones fit to which ones. So I will go and double check that, and we can write that up in the written responses for you. Oh, I think that's the last question. Although training, do tell me if I've missed something. There were lots and lots of questions there.
Yes, that's it.
Brilliant. Okay, I will just pause for another 30 seconds in case someone is typing out a question. But thank you very much for all of those questions. Hopefully that's been helpful. Apologies, there's a few there that I'll have to take away. I can't answer by myself off the top of my head here, but we will do that. As we said, we will pull the report out and write out all of those responses. So if you've either listening back to the recording or actually just want it written down, then it will be there. And those few that I couldn't answer, we can then check up on those and put those in there. I think then we are probably done. Thank you very much, everyone. Very keen to hear if this has been helpful. We love to do these for all the consultations. I admit I don't have time sometimes for some of the short windows, but hopefully for this big AOR one, that has been very, very helpful. Oh, thank you. Lots of thumbs up there. That's very good to know. I think we will leave it there then. If any more questions or anyone listening to the recording, please do drop Leah's in the email. They will always forward them on to me and I can answer them if they can't answer them yourselves. Thank you very much for your time, everyone.